recently celebrated by Mail and Guardian as one of South Africa's 200 youth South Africans. He is an architect, a net zero accredited professional that started his practice, MSSA, in January of 2017. He has grown his practice into an industry leader that has completed some of the most pioneering green buildings in South Africa. He is Marc Sherratt.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm very grateful to be here. My name is Marc Sherratt. I'm a practicing architect, and I've been asked to show you one of our projects this morning that is about elephants. And you'll see a little bit about what does elephants have to do with buildings, what do elephants have to do with architects. Hopefully you learn a little bit about this morning. So generally, Africa is in a crisis. A lot of our species are going extinct. This is because our cities are growing, we're consuming more resources, and elephants are an interesting species, very, very intelligent, and yet they're an endangered species. So that means kind of my son's just been born. When he's 20 years old, if the kind of extinction rates of elephants continue, they'll be extinct when my son is 20 years old. So you won't have elephants in the wild. And you've seen that kind of reduction of the elephant population. In South Africa, we have too many elephants in our game reserves. We don't have enough space. So this was the problem that we were trying to solve as architects. As we know, cities are growing. This is the African continent with the major cities. You can see how Kinshasa growing at 48 new people per hour by 2025. Dar es Salaam, 22 new people per hour by 2025. So our cities are exploding. This is where elephants are found at the moment, kind of, in Southern Africa. This is kind of the biggest population of elephant that we have throughout the continent. And elephants are migratory species. They move a lot. They aren't designed to be kept in these kind of conservation areas. And this is what you do when you keep elephants. The young males are kind of designed to kind of break fences. So even the way that we control something like an elephant is very, very difficult to solve. Fences aren't enough to do that. So what we've designed is a 1,000-kilometer migration route for elephants to move. In South Africa, again, most of our elephants are within fenced conservation areas. So everything you see there in red is what's called a wildlife corridor. That will be new land for elephants. Everything in green typically already hosts elephant. And how do we do that when our cities are growing and throughout the rest of Africa? So if you zoom down a bit more, the green are your big kind of public game reserves in the Limpopo province of South Africa. The red areas is where we are initiating our prototype in terms of getting elephant to move between land parcels. And you can see how this kind of design starts to open up smaller areas. Generally, elephants need a lot of space. But if they're only temporarily moving through your piece of land, you can allow kind of these smaller areas to be part of a migration route for animals. Zooming down a bit more, the two kind of blue land parcels are the one piece of land has elephants and the other piece of land would like to have elephants. And so the problem to solve from a technological point of view is how do you get these animals to move across fence lines? So what we've designed is elephants use infrasound to talk. Infrasound is below human hearing, about 20 hertz, and they can hear to about 4 kilometers away. And we're just starting to understand how this sound works. In that kind of 20 hertz line, there's information about dialects. We know that different elephants across Africa speak different dialects. They can tell if it's male or female. They can tell if they recognize you or not. So we're just starting to understand this kind of very sophisticated elephant language. So our design is using elephant language to communicate with them. We've got a musician who did his master's in elephant acoustics, and he actually designed an elephant language to call the animal so that they know when to actually use this route and when it's dangerous to use it. We designed these sounding towers architecturally to be able to encourage the animal to move, and the idea is trying to rebrand the elephant. Kind of elephants are going extinct because they're being harvested for meat and for ivory, and trying to rebrand the elephant as kind of a custodian of African culture and kind of worth protecting rather than just harvesting as a resource. So the idea is that you use elephants to remove invasive and exotic species in the first year, and then you'd feed them locally indigenous fruiting trees like the marula. Who knows the marula? Kind of very familiar, kind of staple fruit across the Limpopo province. Marula are quite fast growing, kind of 1.5 meters per year. So after kind of the first 5 years, they're already grown to kind of a couple meters high. But by year 10, you've got a self-sustaining food forest gardened by elephants that actually increases food security in these rural areas. And again, this land can actually absorb carbon and be part of reversing climate change at the same time. Marula, as I've mentioned, is a staple food, very high in vitamin C, higher than an orange, very high in protein, and really celebrating kind of, instead of always importing our food and using those crops, why can't we celebrate indigenous fruit that we kind of grow up in? And what happens if these elephants start to move through cities? How would cities have to change involving this kind of endangered animal? So this is us actually building the proof of concept, kind of first of its kind in the world. This is the call of an elephant on a spectrograph. So everything below that number 20 is kind of the stuff that we can't really hear, called infrasound. And that's where that kind of information is around how an elephant communicates. This is our kind of expert musician crafting this elephant language to communicate with them. We first had to do a study of all the kind of indigenous species that use sound, birds, frogs, and make sure that we're not messing with that kind of wildlife at the same time. And then this is our design of this infrasound tower. So basically, you've got a gate that automatically opens for elephant. It uses AI camera technology to correctly identify an elephant and no other animal. So if you've got livestock or you've got other dangerous game, that's not moving through the fence line. It's only elephant. And then the speaker that we've designed is designed to transmit infrasound to about 2 kilometers away. What's interesting about this technology is we had to protect it from lightning. So we had to design what's called a Faraday cage, which is really just a metal mesh around the electrical equipment so that it's protected from being struck by lightning. And we use the inspiration of elephant skin. So elephant skin, African elephant specifically, is designed to crack at a kind of microscopic level. And those cracks fill with water and dust, and that's how the animal cools itself. So what we kind of inspired from that was designing a mesh structure that is in the same morphology of the skin. That's wet, and then that evaporative cooling is what actually cools the equipment. So there's so much inspiration and R&D within our wildlife and our natural areas as Africans. South Africa is known as the 3rd most biodiverse country in the world, and so there's so much R&D just waiting for us as young people to translate. Obviously, infrasound is below human hearing, so there's very, very few speakers that actually play infrasound, and so we had to invent an infrasonic speaker. This is it being invented. It's an amazing feeling. You can't hear it, but you can feel kind of the water in your body vibrating as this sound wave moves through you. This is our professional team. So us as architects, you see it's kind of more technological than a built space, but our role is really to lead this professional team, and that's so important. AI can replace a whole lot of things, but actually leadership is a very difficult thing to replace. Who's going to follow a robot? This shows the diversity of our professional team. We've got behavioral experts on elephants, electrical, mechanical engineers, sound experts, conservationists, all working together. And this is some of the tech that we used in terms of producing the sound. And this is quite an important image. This is for the first time our AI camera system correctly identifying what an elephant looks like. Sometimes a warthog would face kind of the wrong way and kind of look like an elephant, and then you need to teach the program, no, that's not an elephant, that's a warthog. And then this is our elephant gate actually working for the first time, opening automatically for the elephants to move through fence lines as they temporarily migrate. And imagine what this does to rural areas. Instead of kind of one place, Kruger or whatever game reserve where all the tourism goes to, imagine tourism following this migration route across Limpopo. What would that do for rural communities and uplifting them and getting kind of economic stimulus within those specific areas? These are some of our sponsors. I just thank you very much for your time. I think I'll take a couple of questions on the project.
So thank you. I'll ask you a question on what if poachers kill more of the elephants that will be in the place that you'll be doing your project. Will your project still be successful because there won't be more animals that you'll be working around with? And the pictures that you showed us, are they already there? Is it budgeted? Will your business still have enough income to operate? where all the changes that you were telling us about are done.
Thank you for the question. So we have a joke in the team. Give him a round of applause. So answer the first question about security, it's the biggest issue. So obviously the route itself will be electric fence to be able to kind of protect the land in terms of people moving across it. And those specific landowners that you saw are privately owned. So what's nice about that is generally those landowners have the finance to be able to put up that electric fence themselves. But security is a big one. So the ideas that we have at the moment is being able to digitally track these herds as they're moving, so that you can see in real time where the herd is and be able to give additional security. But the issue is if we don't give extra land to these animals, they'll go extinct. So it's kind of, security versus the animal going extinct. We have to try and solve both of those things at the same time. And then you spoke about finance. So generally this project was run through our R&D division, our research and development division within the company. And so everything's been done from a volunteer basis. No one's kind of been paid from anything. It's just been passion work. So what's exciting about the next phase now is kind of getting in government involved, getting other kind of big private landowners. There's been a lot of interest of this in kind of the rest of Southern Africa. So that's kind of the next phase, is to scale it across reserves and kind of future-proof the system as we do that. But thanks for the question.
To all the kids that just entered the room, we do have mics that are going around, so please do raise your hand so that we can see you. We have another question over here.
Is it on? So, when did your project start, and is only your project aimed at saving elephants only? And who's the founder of the project?
So the project, we've been developing it for about 5 years. As an initial idea, wildlife corridors are a common thing that's happening all over the world now. As our cities are growing, we have to think about how do we connect our conservation areas, because they're becoming very isolated around development. So the idea around using elephants as the starting migratory species is because they're so intelligent. They can learn very, very quickly. And so they're probably an ideal candidate to start with, as well as them being kind of endangered. So that was kind of the initiation of the project. But since then, in terms of your question about other species, what's nice about the AI-driven camera technology is you can teach it anything. So we borrowed it from the security industry, where literally the AI can tell if there's a gun in your hand or a knife in your hand. It's down to kind of quite a level of detail already. So you could teach it, other migratory species that used to move in South Africa will be things like springbok that used to migrate in the Karoo. They used to migrate by the millions, less than 100 years ago. So who says we can't bring those migrations back? What's nice about the technology, also in terms of kind of safety and security, is it can identify the wrong people or the wrong species using the gate. So that's a very good question.
Do we have any other questions in the room? Okay, I have a question for you. Oh, wait, we do have one over there.
I'd like to know, how did the experts know that a certain sound of an elephant means, and are they 100% guaranteed that the outcome of the elephant will be positive towards other animals?
That's a good question. Thank you. So it's all about training, and that's, I think, why we started with the elephant. And you can have all the professionals around you, all the experts, but it's only when you build these prototypes that you actually see what's happening. So we started with a domesticated herd, so kind of a semi-tame herd. Elephants are obviously never 100% tame. And we worked with them in terms of training them about the sound, identifying, how the sound works, how they respond to it. And you generally do that with positive reinforcement, like you would train any other animal, feeding them when there's a positive, or scaring them when there's a negative. So that kind of positive reinforcement is the initial step. But the most important one is elephants learn similar to us, through relationships. So elephants are led by the matriarch, which is generally the oldest female. And that family unit will follow that older female. So that's the kind of elephant you need to train. The second one you need to train is the young males. The young males are the ones that break out of their herd when they're kind of young or getting too old for the herd, and they're the ones that actually are in nature the ones that find new territory. Those are the two animals you actually need to train to get this thing to work properly. And that's the phase we're in now, kind of transitioning from a domesticated herd to a wild herd. But a lot of what we're doing has never been done before. So you've got to move very slowly, making sure you're documenting all the process and obviously having kind of the best in your field alongside with you to give advice. But that's a great question.
Any more questions? Are there any questions on this side of the room? Another one over here. And then we have another question on that side of the room.
Thank you. So I would like to ask that the waves, the sounds that the elephants you use, guys, how do they affect humans, or they don't have any effect on humans? And I think I heard you saying that you are saving elephants from becoming extinct. So I'd like to ask, why don't we save rhinos before elephants? Because rhinos are also important in South Africa.
So I think the rhino, obviously rhino are a very different species. They're not naturally migratory. So, you know, we kind of started with this project as an architectural firm looking at how do we create wildlife corridors. And you generally need kind of a hero species to drive that. So elephants being naturally migratory, they kind of migrate sometimes up to 60 kilometers a day, was a really good starting point for us. And them being kind of endangered was a good point. So that's really why we started. Just repeat the second question you had.
I was saying the sound waves that you guys use in hearing how elephants communicate, do they affect humans or they don't?
So that's a very good question. It's all about how loud you play the sound. So yes, if you kind of standing next to an infrasonic speaker and it's playing very, very loud, it can affect you. I'm sure there's military programs looking at infrasound as to weaponize infrasound. But in terms of the kind of intensities we're playing at, no, there'd be no effect. And obviously, importantly, not just humans, but other wildlife, that we had to map that to make sure that they're not affected. But that's a great question.
Hello. I want to ask about, I heard you were talking about electric fence, okay? During load shedding, how those elephants will be protected or go around? Like, what do you do? Instead of generator or what?
That's a great question. So it's all solar powered. All solar powered and battery driven. So even the tower itself, you know, I can go back to the image, but all of it's solar powered with a battery system within it. So there's no grid connection when it comes to both the electric fence or the sounding tower.
Any other questions? Okay, so my question for you was that I think when we think of the profession architecture or just, you know, the industry in architecture, I always think of building buildings. I think of what I like, you know, building homes and that type of stuff, but I never would have pictured it as something like this. And I guess that's because my mind never had the vocabulary, or I never thought that this was a sort of problem that needed to be solved and could be solved through architecture. How did you guys come to, first of all, learning about this problem, and how did you find the link between architecture and it being applied in this way?
That's a good question. So what's important about your studies is generally even something written down is already 10 years old. So I think what's important to know is that, you know, the old days of you getting a profession and staying in that profession your whole life are gone. And my personal passion is around nature, biodiversity, protecting that. And I only really got exposed to kind of connecting kind of the social problems that we have to solve in Africa with kind of biodiversity extinction, and climate change being kind of the overall problem above those two. So those three pillars, kind of social upliftment, biodiversity increase, and climate change reversal, are the three pillars of our company in terms of how do we solve that in a way. And architecture is really simply just creating safe spaces for people to live. And when we asked ourselves that, we said, why are we only limiting that to people? Why can't we increase that to wildlife? Us as Africans, there's always been a direct link, even spiritually, between the natural realm and the social realm. And it's only kind of after colonialization that there's this separation now that nature needs to sit over there in some fenced reserve, and we need to sit here in our home. So a lot of the work we're doing is trying to kind of reconnect Africans with their wildlife and the nature that surrounds them, but still solving things like food security and other, unemployment at the same time. Most of these problems are multifaceted. You have to solve them. You have to have one solution that solves multiple problems.
I need to give you a high five for that, because you're combining your passions, and not just one passion, multiple passions, and you're still creating change and you're impacting people's lives. And like you said, not just people, not just humans, you're impacting the lives of elephants, and this is just the starting point. I'm excited, and I look forward to see how this project evolves and where it goes. Don't you guys think? Yeah. Please can we give it a hand for Marc once again.